I grew up in Levittown, Long Island, the cookie cutter community where the post-war veterans were able to buy a house with no down payment. I remember the houses were sold for between $7,500 and $9,000, and the monthly mortgage was $75. We moved there from Brooklyn in 1952. My father was a career Army officer. My mother was a part-time and then full-time secretary. And the first inkling I had of an outside world that seemed to be something more exciting than Levittown was Mad Magazine. So I was about 10, and it was Mad Magazine number 4, which had a cover by Basil Wolverton. It was a parody of Life magazine. Life magazine at that point would have like a pretty girl on the cover very often, like a very wholesome pretty girl. So this was Basil Wolverton having this grotesque female with, warts and snot dripping off of her, and just, it was Basil Wolverton at his most grotesque. And I bought that for a quarter and brought it into the house, and my father immediately confiscated it and said, "This shall never come to the house again." He then banned Elvis Presley from the house. So of course I then collected Mads, and I bought Elvis Presley 45s and kept them in somebody else's house so I could visit them. What was Mad? Mad was a life raft to me in Eisenhower era 1950s America. It showed me that there was another world outside of Levittown in which all the things that I felt sort of queasy about were then viciously parodied. The message of Mad Magazine, the message of Harvey Kurtzman, the genius original editor of Mad Magazine, their message was, everybody is lying to you. Your parents, your teachers, your government, advertising, they're all lying to you. And what do you do about that? How do you fight that? You make fun of it. You don't get serious about it, you get funny about it. This was a powerful message that I received. This was way before I became a cartoonist, but it was literally a seed that sprouted later when I was, how old was I when I did my first comics? 24. So yeah, my first real thoughts about what art was from Mad Magazine, followed very quickly by abstract expressionism. I had a neighbor in Levittown, sort of a famous science fiction illustrator named Ed Emshwiller. He signed his work Emsh, E-M-S-H. He produced hundreds of science fiction covers right next door to me. He was kind of a role model. But he also introduced me to fine art. He had art books, art magazines, coffee table books. He and his wife both looked like beatniks. They wore black turtlenecks, and he had a goatee. My family, he used us as models for his covers. Sometimes on the weekend there would be a knock on the door. He would say, can Bill come over? I need a pose. So I went over. He took me upstairs to his studio, and it was over very quick. He took Polaroids. So we didn't have to pose in the sense that you would pose for a painting. And this was the early Polaroids with the really smelly chemicals that had to be rubbed off of it to make it happen. And so we took pictures, and then he used us. Sometimes they looked like portraits. Other times he just used the pose, and it didn't look like us. There's a famous one in 1957 that has made the rounds of the internet, in which I am seen piloting a spaceship. It's an interior shot. Out the window is the moon on the left, and in the distance is the Earth. And there's a TV screen, a little science fiction-y TV screen above me. And I'm looking at that TV screen, I'm smiling, and on the screen is my father, who posed for the authority figure on the TV screen, the military authority, telling me to get my head out of the clouds and come back home. This was a perfect representation of my relationship to my father. And it was a dead-on portrait of me and of him. Not an approximation, a completely M. Schwiller was an amazingly talented artist. So when he did use us, he really used us all the way. He used my mother fairly often for Michael Shane mystery covers. My mother was very pretty, sexy. I was aware of that because my friends would all say, "How did your father get such a pretty wife? How did that happen?" So she was, you know, with the 50s kind of Angora sweaters, and wide black belts, and red skirts. You know, she'd be on the cover of Michael Shane with a guy in the distance with a gun coming for her. So these were seeds that were planted in me that eventually sprouted and turned me into a cartoonist.